Welcome to TechNATO's Human and Cyber series. My name is Jill Cagliostro, Senior Director of Product Management with ZeroFox. Today, we're going to be answering some common questions about phishing, so let's get started. Simple lures work because they're simple. They're designed to trigger fight or flight mode and play off human emotion, not your security trainings and protocols. When fight or flight mode is triggered, it takes approximately 90 seconds for the brain to process and release the emotion, which means that's how long it takes for your security training to kick in. And so the attacker's primary goal is to get the user to click that link or open the attachment in that time window before the brain re-engages, keeping them in a hyper-emotional rather than logical state. It doesn't take long enough to read the phishing attack and for your brain to process and kick in and say, something's weird here. Keeping it simple is why they work. Well, we all know urgency and fear. It's probably the best way to get into that fight or flight mode. The bad guys always threaten, do this now or else this really bad thing will happen. It could be a mission-critical vendor service is about to be disabled, or, the infamous IRS scams. But we often overlook our own egos or excitement that are exploited as well. Employees might be overconfident because we passed all that phishing training, so surely I won't get tricked. Or in a business setting, phishing emails often come from an impersonated executive, leading to excitement to exposure at such a high level in the organization, which makes the user respond a little faster and think a little less. And so the more steps there are, the more opportunity there is for the victim to come out of fight or flight mode and realize what's going on. So with that in mind, their goal is to keep them to as simple as possible in terms of how they design their attacks. They typically conduct recon, social media stalking, reading the news and latest press releases on the business to understand their target inside and out. Sometimes they may have or buy data from past breaches to get an insider perspective, like what software you use to maybe make your impersonation a little more realistic, or learn your project code names and who's working on them. And they use this information to create tailored phishing campaigns that exploit the tools you use, your project code names, all of your trade secrets that they may have gotten access to either through social engineering or through a past breach. But what's worse is if they can't design it themselves, the attackers can buy it with the wide availability of phish kits for sale on the dark web. And we see that happening every day where attackers' base level of skill set that's needed to conduct an attack has significantly decreased as more people have begun to discuss these things openly in the dark web and share resources amongst threat actors. And so this leads us to how do we help our employees stay safe, right? Well, there's some behaviors and there's some job functions. Let's start with the behaviors. Getting into that inbox triage mindset is how often users will get tricked, right? You're going through 50 emails all at once, trying to get through your inbox. You get to that urgent one that looks a lot like the other one, and you click the link without thinking. By not conducting these inbox triages, instead breaking up the task and focusing more mentally on it, you're less likely to be tricked into that fight or flight mode. The other workplace behavior that's more risk-prone is the yes man mentality, where people are afraid to ask questions or point out concerns. Those are the types of employees that are easily pressured into phishing attempts because they're too scared to say something or too excited to meet the request, especially if it comes from an internal stakeholder. And certain job functions and tasks are higher value targets to our attackers, like those in finance or access to issue payments or access to trade secrets, right? So that being hyper vigilant when conducting those kinds of job functions or when inbox triaging can really help you avoid being phished yourself. Well, the hard truth is, it's not the training, it's the culture. Existing training does an incredible job of evangelizing how not to get tricked, but there's so much pressure on the individual who may not be as tech savvy. I've seen organizations slash bonuses over failing security training, or even fire employees over being phished by a very complex attack that even most security experts probably would have been fooled by. The problem with our approach to training is that it doesn't create a sense of community or shared responsibility. It keeps the focus on the individual employee following it perfectly every time, even when there's an important business deadline ticking, or work may be a little chaotic, or there's a distraction in their personal life. And if I know one thing about people, we're never perfect. I had the privilege of working with the CISO of Comcast, Newport Davis, in my last role as Director of Product at DataBee. She championed cybersecurity as a shared responsibility across all business units. That fundamental shift in approaching the problem as a unified organization rather than individuals being held personally accountable created a culture where security is the start of a conversation, not the end of a career. And that open conversation leads to a more empowered and informed workforce who's aligned to your mission. The attacker is going to try to trick the user into comfort. Ideally, they want the recipient to either know the organization or the person they think is sending the message. If they think the email is coming from their CEO or their mission-critical vendor, they're much more likely to respond quickly in that 90-second mark that we're looking for, or the attacker is. And they want the email to look and feel the same so their targets don't think too hard about it. Language choice and typos used to be a dead giveaway for the feel of the message being off, but as attackers are leveraging AI more and more to generate and edit these messages, we've lost our more obvious signals. Further, attackers are going to use logos of trusted brands to lull their users into a false sense of security. In the email, on the fake login page, embedded in that malware you just opened, also you don't think too hard about what you're clicking on. And that's the tough part about combating phishing. It's all about the human element. The best advice I can offer is to create a personal process to disrupt the adversary. When an urgent email or text comes in, read it without clicking. Set a 90-second timer and read it again before taking action. This gives your brain enough time for your security training to click in and to think clearly about the request in front of you instead of responding from fight or flight mode. There are very few jobs where a 90-second delay in an email is truly life or death. Use that knowledge to overrule the fight or flight mode that the attacker is pushing you towards. Thanks for joining me today, and stay safe out there.